Hi, I'm Barbara from Bee's Kitchen and Garden, and I'm here to share with you today a way to make a yummy loaf bread. First, let's focus on the ingredients you need and the utensils you will need. The ingredients are very simple. 4 ingredients: flour, salt, yeast, and water. Now I have butter here because at the very end we're going to use that. But flour, salt, yeast, and water are your 4 main ingredients. You will then need these utensils: a mixing bowl, a bowl to bake your bread in, and I'll explain why I'm using this one, a measuring cup, parchment paper. Do not use wax paper or craft paper. You will end up with a fireman at your door and a fire in your oven. We have a sharp knife, a whisk, a spatula, a spoon, meat or food thermometer, measuring spoons, a brush for the butter to paint the butter, and a small tin to put in the oven, and I'll explain all that later. So go gather your stuff, hit pause, and then hit play. Now, you don't need to pat it down because depending on what happens with your flour, it could be too much. So just pour in 3 cups. Add to that the salt, a teaspoon and a half of salt. Oh, and I need to remind you, always when you're baking, wash your hands really well before you start touching food. And I'm a hands-on cook, so at some point you'll see my hands in this stuff. That is 1.5 teaspoons of salt. Now, some people do not like to add salt to anything because they figure it's not as healthy. If you don't add salt, it won't interact with your yeast and you will not get a good bread. So you need to add the salt. Then we have 1/4 teaspoon of active dry yeast. Now, this is where your whisk comes in. You want to mix those dry ingredients really, really well together. If you don't have a whisk, don't worry, use a spoon. But just make sure everything is mixed really, really well. Now I'm going to go get some water. I'm using 1.5 cups of hot water. The hot water is very important because it will interact with the yeast and the salt and the flour. So what I did is I put 1.5 cups of water in here, put it in the microwave for about 60 seconds. As we know, all microwaves are different, so check it. After that, check it with your meat thermometer. And mine went up to 100 degrees. What you want is between 95 and 105. That's the perfect hot water temperature to get that yeast going. So pour it in and use your spoon and start stirring. Get all that flour, scrape it around. This bread is so yummy. And I have to tell you, this dough can be so forgiving. It doesn't matter what you do. You just want to make sure all your flour is absorbed and all of that dry mixture gets water in it so that you don't have any leftover little scraggly stuff on the bottom, and so that everything is, oh, this is so delicious. This is going to be such a yummy bread. There we go. It's getting there. It's not quite there. I want it to be one big piece, and it's not quite there yet. So I'm going to, frankly, with my clean hands, I'm going to form it into a ball so that we can get it as it needs to be for rising. There we go. Now it's starting to stick together. As I say, I'm a hands-on baker, and a lot of people after this would put it in a different bowl. They might even oil the sides, but you don't need to do all that. Just use your same bowl. Just make sure it's well mixed. Oh, now it's getting nice and sticky, and it will be warm because you just put in hot water. So let's get this in, fold it in on itself. Again, you're not going to need any kneading. All you need to do is make sure you've got a nice round junk piece of flour, yeast, salt, and water. Okay, so that's looking really good. And it's time to let it rise. So cover it with a cloth And you want to put it in a place where there is no draft, so you don't have air conditioning blowing on it or heat blowing on it. So I just stick it in the oven because there's not going to be any draft in my oven. I don't turn on the oven. And let's let it rise for 4 hours. I set the timer on my cell phone for 4 hours. Well, now our dough has been rising for 4 hours. I use my cell phone timer because I always have my cell phone in my pocket. No matter where I am in the house, I'll hear it when it goes off. Here's our dough that's been rising for 4 hours. Now, it's going to be fluffy and it's going to be sticky, but that's what you want. My hands I just washed, so make sure your hands are very clean, because at this point, what I do is I start working the dough, and look how nice and sticky it is. Really sticky. So I'm going to put a little bit of flour on my hands. As I say, I'm a hands-on person. A little bit of flour there. And what you want to do is get the stickiness out of, actually get the dough out of the bowl by doing this for the sticky part. Now, it's still a little sticky, so I just get a little more flour. All right, here we go. Now, I want to get as much of that as I can. I don't like leaving it in the dish. Nice and sticky. Dough like this needs to rise twice. So what we're doing is we're taking it out of this bowl and we're going to put it in the container or the baking pan or the glass baking pan, metal or glass, where we're going to bake it. Now I used to use a cookie sheet. When I used a cookie sheet, the loaf itself flattened. So if you like a flat loaf, use a cookie sheet. I like a taller loaf, so I've decided to use a souffle dish or any kind of baking dish to make it taller. Oh boy, we're almost done here. Okay, so now knead it just a little bit. Work with your dough. Okay, this is fun. A little bit of aggression can come out of it. You know, all those chores you've got to do, all that paperwork you've got to do, you can take it out on the dough. All right, dough, you look like you're done pretty well here. Folding it over, pushing it around. So I'm going to let go of you. Take my parchment paper and put it in the dish I'm going to bake it in. All right, in you go. Get those sides down because otherwise paper's going to just pop right out at you. So you got to work with that paper. Not too gentle. This dough is so forgiving. It's such a fun recipe. Now I'm just going to pour it in. See if this will go. Are you pouring? Are you pouring? Ah, you're pouring. Okay, keep going. In you go. Let's go. It's like a kid that doesn't want to get in the bathtub. Always delaying. Okay, there we go. So it looks like a nice round piece of dough. And what we're going to do now is let it rise for the second time. We're going to let it rise for 45 minutes. And I'm going to leave this one on the counter because in 30 minutes I'm coming back to preheat my oven. So let the dough rise for 45 minutes and I'll come back a little early to preheat the oven and to show you about the melted butter part. Hi, I'm back because now it's time to put our bread in the oven. I came back a little early and I preheated my oven to 400. That's preheated my oven to 400 degrees. I also started my little pan getting warm because I'm going to take about 2 tablespoons of butter and melt it. Now, I keep my butter brush in the fridge in a baggie, so I never really have to clean it because all I use it for is butter. And let's see, this is sizzling, so we're going to swish this around. Sometimes I will use the microwave to heat up the butter. If you use the microwave, just do increments of small settings until it's soft. It doesn't have to be totally melted. It will melt the rest of the way by itself because you don't want your butter exploding in your microwave. So this time I'm using a pan, and this butter is just about melted. So let's look at our bread. Oh, lovely. Look at that. Beautiful. And see, because of the sides of the dish, I'm getting a taller loaf than if I put it on a baking sheet because it would have risen, spreading itself out. So that's how I like it. Now, looks like my butter's ready, just about. I'm going to go behind me and get a sharp knife because I forgot to put it out. Hold on. Here we go. Got it. Okay. So what I'm going to do is turn off the butter. It's certainly soft enough. And I am going to, can you get the top of the bread there? Okay, we're going to brush on our butter. Here we go. Oh, this is perfect. Brush the butter on. It doesn't matter if the butter gets on the paper because remember, it's parchment paper and it's made for baking. So it doesn't care if it gets butter, and in fact, then it might even go down the sides. You might get a little more butter on the sides. This is going to be so delicious. This helps give it a little bit of flavor on the top, and this will work well with what I'm going to show you next, which is when we put it in the oven. I'm just going to pour the last amount on. There we go. You can't have too much butter, right? Okay. So this is now ready to go in the oven at 400 degrees for 30 minutes. But wait, it's not really ready. I forgot. We have to score it. So take your sharp knife and score your bread different ways. You can do one like this. Your choice. Be creative. However you want your little slanted items to look. They'll bake right in and they'll look gorgeous. I'm going to put one more here. Now we're ready to go in the oven. Okay, we're headed to the oven. Now, here is a cup just filled with water. The reason we use the water is for steam while the bread is baking. Here we go. I have a tin in the oven. The water goes in the tin. It will produce steam while the bread is baking and you get that nice crust on the top. Here comes the bread. And in the oven it goes. 400 degrees for 30 minutes. Hi, I'm back, and we're back after 30 minutes of baking. Let's see how our bread looks and take it out of the oven. Oh, wow. I tell you. Here's our beautiful, yummy loaf bread. Well, we brought the bread over to the counter, and the nice thing about parchment paper, it's not going to be hot. The bread is hot, the dish is hot, but not the paper. So let's see how it looks. We're going to take it out and put it on the cutting board. And there is our beautiful, yummy loaf bread. You should let it cool for about 10 minutes before cutting into it. It's always hard for me to wait those 10 minutes because I love hot bread and butter, or hot bread and margarine, or hot bread and olive oil. Okay, see you next time. Remember, my episodes air every Friday at 5:30 Eastern Time. Goodbye for now.